Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm your host, John Connors. I'm also the founder and head instructor of Connors Martial Arts here in Norwood, Massachusetts. We teach Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai, kickboxing, and mixed martial arts. And I'm here with my co-host, Dan Robin. How you doing, Dan?
Great.
Great. I love it. You hit that Tony Robbins-esque.
Have we decided that's what inspires people? Like
Yes.
energy, positivity?
Conviction. Not necessarily positively. You can be very negative, but you have conviction about it.
Great.
I am
Why
great.
are the listeners not doing great?
They're not listening to enough of our episodes.
Exactly.
Yeah, they got to re-listen to them.
That's exactly where I was headed with that. And not
Okay.
only that, not only should they listen to this episode in its entirety, they really should start at 1 and go through all the episodes.
You think?
To get the, to have a thread, like to follow the thread.
Okay.
You can't just take it out of context.
You know what, Dan? I would never do that myself. But you know what I would do? I would go reverse chronology. I would start with this one and go backwards. That's the way I roll.
Right.
So I get to the point where I don't care anymore. Then I would stop. But
That's a good idea.
yeah,
But you'll never stop because they're all so good.
they're all so good. Yeah.
Especially the early ones. You got to go all the way back.
Well,
You
I was
see
telling
how we got
Dimitri the couple of our last published ones, 12 Unwritten Rules of BJJ
Mhm.
and How to Spot a Phony Guru.
Mm-hmm.
Those were exceptionally well received.
Really?
So, yeah, people seem to really like them. I don't know.
So now, after 90 episodes, we're zeroing in on the formula.
I think Dimitri, I published 93, I think, today. So we get we get one in the hopper. And then, so this is 95, maybe. This could be 95.
All right, we're going to hit our stride around 100.
And you know how many views we have on our YouTube channel? 99,465. So we're going to hit the 100,000 mark in the next few episodes
yeah,
or so.
in fact, listener, if you listen or view on YouTube, you could be the 100,000th viewer.
Dan, we're going to give a special prize to whoever's the 100,000th viewer.
Sounds good.
It's impossible to identify them, but they will get an amazing prize.
Maybe if they claim to be the 100,000th viewer.
That's it.
And
If
message
you can convince us,
You can message John.
it'll sound good to me. And then I'll give you something. I don't know.
T-shirt.
T-shirt and a hoodie,
Something.
kick in the
To,
ass.
to the 100,000th viewer.
To 100,000th viewer. Yeah, that's exciting.
I thought about that when I tell some story about my life on here, and then I'm like, so 100,000 views have happened of this? Like, that's by far more than...
Anything else you've ever done in your life.
than any other, like, if you added up all the people I ever told that story to. And I get, it's like, for all the obnoxious people out there being like, well, it's not 100,000 people, like, with some skipped it or whatever,
right.
but it's like, it doesn't matter. Like, any story of anything in my life, I've probably told 40 people that story.
What is your most? Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so it's like,
yeah.
even if 100,000 didn't hear that story, if
Right.
40,000 heard, if 4,000 heard,
10,000.
it's more than.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's weird.
And now you have a legacy, so your grandkids can go back and watch these episodes and learn about Pop Pop
I know.
and all those crazy
I know,
stories.
great. Like, 800 years, they're gonna someone's gonna do like archival research into their ancestors.
Right. When I start my cult, this will be like our.
Yeah, when are you gonna start the cult?
this will be.
You got to get on that.
Our founding documents, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but you'll have to delete them because you seem too human on this. You're gonna have to, when you start the cult, you're gonna have to be above.
Oh, right.
Above everyone.
Have to do something. Yeah. Very cool. And how are you doing on a scale of 1 to 10?
Very good. A solid 7. I'd be an 8,
Nice.
but actually let me take 2 seconds to bounce this off you, and you'll recognize some of these examples.
All right.
But I can sum it up in 30 seconds. I'm starting to think I have some level of OCD.
Okay.
So I realize some people out there, let me say, are tortured by it and miserable by it. I get it. I'm not saying I'm in that boat. But I think, there's a continuum. And I realized, so I've told you some stories like in passing in the past where it's like for 5 years in my house, I'll have like a blue towel on the right and a gray towel on the left.
Okay.
And then I'll come in, take a shower, and they're flipped. And I'm like, what the hell is this?
Who's flipping these things?
My wife does it.
Huh.
And I'll be like, what? You can't just, And like I'll switch it back and I'll talk to my wife, be like, why were the towels on
Is
the
that
wrong
OCD?
side? And she'll be like, I don't know what do you mean?
Hmm.
Yeah, but that's one example. But there's a lot. Like one time, like we have cups in the cupboard,
Okay.
and it'll be like a stack, like 2 different kinds. Like maybe one has rough edge, one smooth.
Okay.
And they'll be stacked like rough, smooth, and then another stack, rough, smooth, rough. And I'm like, what is this? Like, and I'll take them apart and put like all the rough, all this kind of cup here and all this kind of cup here.
Okay.
Like, to me, I'm like, we live in a society, in a civilized society. You can't just mix things up. You can't just switch towels. One time I came in my toothbrush, 8 years in the same spot. It's like in a different spot. And I'm like, what? Who would do this? Are you out of your mind?
Chaos.
Are you insane? Yeah.
Anarchy.
Yes. Yeah. We have rules.
Do you have Antifa in your house?
We have laws.
I know.
And I'm like, we can't just go through society with madness.
That's crazy.
But what I'm asking is it me? Is that OCD? Or is it like, to me, I'm like, I have no OCD. That seems insane.
No, you're just conscientious. No, the one that gets me is I have the bathroom scale, and I have it lined up according to the tiles, right? So it's parallel to the square tiles. Every once in a while, I'll come in, and it's slightly crooked. And I'm like, who the hell did this?
And how could you see it and not be like, I'm just going to fix it?
Yeah, and then we have one at the gym, too, in the academy, and I have it so it's perpendicular to the wall, and every once in a while it'll be like at a 40-degree angle, and I'm like, what savage did that? Like, and they had to like knock it or drag it. I'm like, so somebody deliberately dragged it at a weird angle and left it there like that. I should go to my cameras and find out who's doing this
and kick them out of the gym.
Yeah, after I hit them over the head with the scale itself. Yeah.
There's a side issue which is just actually helping. Like, I was walking around the block last night, and one of those like basketball nets that the kids play on, like on the street, had fallen into the middle of the street.
Okay.
And my wife said it had been there since the morning, and she's like, some car's going to hit it. And I'm like, well, I'm going to stand it up, right? Like, I'm like, so
okay, that's an idea.
Anyway, like stand it up, and it was bad balance, so then I had to find some rocks to fix it. So some of it is also like, will you go out of your way to fix something?
Oh,
and
right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of people are so apathetic. They're just like, yeah, it's not my thing. And, you know, like they'll walk right around the basketball hoop in the middle of the net. The basketball hoop in the middle of the street.
Yeah.
They'll walk around it. And so part of it is that I'm like, I'll go out of my way to like,
do you know who
fix a scale.
Whose property it was?
It was between two, so I'm not sure.
You're not sure. Oh, that makes it a little tricky, right?
But I was just like, let me just fix this. And I did think about that some neighbor can always run out, start yelling, like, what are you doing?
But the neighbor should be fixing. Whoever owns it should. That's pretty inconsiderate.
But as I've told you recently, I'm really apathetic. Like, if a neighbor came out and was like, why are you touching my net? I'd be like, whatever, man. Like, I'm really trying to, like, not. I wouldn't even yell. You know, I'm just like, all right. Like,
yeah.
So that's what I thought, too. I'm like, even if someone starts yelling at me, I don't care. But so some of it's that, but also the rest is just like that orderly thing. Like, I'm sort of feel like you can't just have chaos.
You can't have chaos. Yeah.
It's like making your bed in the morning. Which
that's not OCD. Yeah. That's a level of conscientiousness, which is necessary for success in life. That's probably the key personality trait for success, conscientiousness.
And how would you define conscientiousness?
It's defined, Dan, as one part of it, one component is orderliness. And another, I think, is reliability. You know, you're the person who pays their bills on time and shows up to appointments.
So OCD is maybe when it gets out of control and like you can't.
I think so.
Handle anything being, you know,
hyper-conscious
or meaningless things. You have to start straightening up.
Yeah, that's probably it.
All right, so I'm in the clear.
I think you're in the clear.
All right.
Dan, I would describe you as sickeningly one of the most mentally healthy people I know, unfortunately. Yeah. So
well, I feel mentally healthy.
You're so psychologically healthy, it's annoying to the rest of us. Wouldn't you say that, Dimitri? Yeah. Yeah, you're pretty sound. You're sound. Yeah.
People are irritated with me.
Yeah. You're like, yeah, when I want to lose weight, I just stop eating processed food. And my weight goes down. I just look at the Oreos and I say, I'm not eating you because I want to lose some body fat, and then I lose body fat. I'm like, huh. By the way, I just came back from the Pans down in Orlando.
Right.
And it was hard. I finally made weight, but it was a struggle, man.
And these are the Pan Ams.
Yeah.
Jiu-Jitsu.
IBJJF, Jiu Jitsu pans, they call them now, I guess. Yeah. With the gi. And I went down there with my son Rory, with Maria Kipreos, and Steve Chorney went also. And everyone did really well. It was awesome. Yeah. And I struggled to make weight. I finally got down there. I thought I was on weight. And then I tested the official scale, and I still had 1.5 pounds to lose. Oof.
Did you have to actually like get on a treadmill or, you know, like?
Not really, Dan, because I had a couple days. But I did do 1 hour of what I call aerobic conditioning. So I don't know if I described that to you before. So I use what's called the Maffetone method. So there's a famous coach called Phil Maffetone. He coaches endurance athletes. He's very famous. Coached a lot of world champions, champions of the Ironman triathlons and these types of things. So his method is you do some activity where you keep your heart rate at 180 minus your age. So for me, that puts me at about 123, which
about 80.
Yeah, which is surprisingly easy to get your heart rate there. So you're really not working that hard. But it's a good kind of, I think it's also a pretty good fat burning pace to go at. So I did an hour of sort of push-ups and squats and sit-throughs and lunges in my room, that type of thing. And then I pretty much ate just meat and cut way back on the carbs.
I'm thinking that through. I just realized that I've never really done a heart rate monitor, but when, like, I've been on a stepper at the gym, like the stairs, the unending stairs kind of thing. And sometimes it automatically tells me my heart rate when I'm not asking it. It just does it. It's pretty easy to get it up pretty high. Like, I've suddenly been on there and I'm like 160 or something, you know?
Yeah.
Usually that means because I go treadmill, stepper.
Yeah.
And so, but then sometimes I'm like way above 180 minus my age.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I'm only on stairs is what I'm saying. I'm
right.
not like sprinting up a hill.
I guess the thing is, if you train that way regularly over time, after about 6 months or so, you start to really increase your capacity for work under that threshold of heart rate. And I'm not there because I don't do it enough. But so I did that, and then I made weight, and life is good. Yeah, but it was hard. Yeah, I had to eat well for at least a month, I think, to get my top weight was 187 point something, and I had to get down to 176, so I had to lose about 11 pounds or so. It wasn't easy. I feel for anyone out there trying to lose body fat. Man, got to eat strict. It's tricky.
Because what happens is, and you had this, and I had it too, those days where you're like, I didn't even eat today. Like, I had like chicken, you know, like
I would have a piece of bread
chicken
with a sandwich, and I'd gain 4 pounds. It seemed physically impossible, but
like I gained more weight than the actual food I ate. Like I ate a pound of food and gained 4 pounds.
Yeah, that happened pretty regularly for me. But now I'm the opposite. So now I got the fat burning engine going. So the other night, Dan, I had a 1 pound ribeye. I got it from Whole Foods. It weighed a pound, right? That's a pretty big steak, right? And I also had a fried egg, and I had an avocado, and get this, basically not a full pint, but essentially a pint of Ben & Jerry's Cherry Garcia. And I woke up and I lost a 0.5 pound. Insanity, right? I don't think I can repeat that.
When you're fighting, that's what you should have done the night before your weigh-in to get that extra weight off.
Yeah.
It is a little curious that you stopped with a little left in a pint of Ben.
No, I didn't stop with a little left. What happened is I ate a little bit the day before.
That makes more sense.
And then I just
because that's what happens with the pints of ice cream. You're always like, well, I'm just going to finish it now. Like whenever there's this much, you know.
You don't want to be a quitter.
You ate 3/4 of it. You're like, well, what's the point now? Also, then you're just sitting there like Jabba the Hutt and the big, you know, just spooning ice cream into your mouth. You're like, what's the difference at this point?
Yeah.
It's over for me for the night. It's not been a good, healthy night. Like, I might as well finish this and
the hell with it, right?
Have another drink, and
that's it.
So, what specifically were your results for the Pan Ams?
My results, I had 2 matches. I got 2 victories, so I came away with a gold medal. So that's very exciting. Yeah.
I did see a picture of you,
some of my students posted some pictures. Yeah. Very nice of them. I'm trying to deliberately not post on Facebook because I'm trying to not chase that pseudo status that we talked about, that fake esteem. I think it's dangerous, But yeah, it was a great experience. Maria Kipreos, silver medalist. Man, she is really putting together a very impressive jiu-jitsu career.
Yeah, and a great trajectory, it seems.
Yeah, yeah. So proud of her. Awesome.
Doing it the right way, as is Rory.
Yep. Rory was winning his match, and he got DQ'd on some kind of sort of technicality. So that was
some sort of leg creep type of thing.
Yeah. What are you going to do? Oh, well, live and learn. We won't do that again.
Yep.
Steve Chorney had a great first match that he won. He had a really strong performance. And the second match, he just met a guy who was really, really good.
Yep.
So he lost the second match. I mean, there's nobody that's not good that's going to these tournaments. So it's going to happen. But he had a good performance.
You don't have the worst people
day.
in the gym showing up at the tournaments, right?
That's the other
people
thing,
that think they're going to win.
That's it.
We've always said that, and the people at the gym that are like, well, he's really good. I'm really good. I'm going to go to the tournament. That's everyone that's going to
pretty much
tournaments, right?
Yeah. There's not too many people that are getting smoked in their own academy that are going to go to the Pans or the Worlds or something.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. So it's great. It was another great memory, great experience.
You felt like you learned because we talked about that, right?
I did, Dan. So I'll tell you what I learned. I had mentioned to you, I was struggling with my motivation initially for this tournament. And one of the things I initially came up with was, I'm going to do a new takedown.
Right. We talked about it last time. And
Did we talk about it in here?
Yeah, you talked about it, and you said you pulled.
I almost ripped my body in half.
You're doing it wrong.
My collarbone was sticking out. It's still sticking out like a half an inch here. And I was doing drop knee Taitoshi incorrectly. And like an idiot, it took me like 3 weeks to realize, gee, why am I in throbbing pain?
Why am I in constant pain?
So I learned how to do it correctly. So I feel good about that. So I did not attempt it.
You were too injured to
attempt it. Yeah. So I didn't attempt it. So then I really got motivated by this concept of building an ecosystem in our academy. So in other words, I was listening to this evolutionary scientist, and he's talking about how we evolve, and it isn't just an individual competing against other individuals. Like the system itself can evolve and thrive. And I'm like, that concept resonates with me. So I want our academy to be an environment, an ecosystem that's evolving to create very good competitors, great competitors. It's a system that helps people develop themselves. So what can I do as the professor to help this ecosystem evolve, help it get better? So that's how I approached the competition. And then that put my mind in the right place. And so what did I learn based on that? I learned how to relax a little bit more even. So I would say I had my most relaxed performance ever competing, which is big.
That's big. That's huge for a lot of competitors, right?
Yeah, yeah. And so one of the techniques is a simple breathing technique, Dan. So if you exhale longer than you inhale, you turn on your relaxation response. You turn on your parasympathetic nervous system, the part of your autonomic nervous system. So in other words, it's commonly said you're going to breathe in through your nose for a count of 4 and breathe out through your mouth probably a count of 8. And by doing that, you turn on your relaxation response. So I was using that breathing method right before I stepped on in order to keep myself in that nice, relaxed place. Now, I also have an app on my phone, a free app, and it measures your HRV. So they have a little kind of exercise in there where they take a snapshot of your HRV, which is your heart rate variability, which is an indication of how stressed your system is. And it spends 2 minutes, it measures it. So maybe I do it, it gives me a score of, say, 54. Okay? And higher is typically better. It's more or less on a scale of 0 to 100. And then for 20 minutes, it measures your HRV, and you can see it in real time measuring it. And you breathe, and you try to relax, and you try to raise your HRV. So it's actual visual feedback. So I did, and it's a little 20-minute exercise. So I did that a few times when I was in Florida. And the idea is you want to train yourself to raise your HRV, which is the same as turning
So
on your
eventually,
relaxation
you're not even
response.
looking at the app. You
Yeah.
just sort of know how
Just
to.
naturally do it. And there's that golfer who won the U.S. Open, I think is Bryson Dechambeau or something. And I guess he uses a device from a company called, it's like neuro something feedback. I don't know. But I'm going to invest in their device and their plan. So I guess he's doing it not just when he's golfing. He's doing it like when he's watching a movie. So he might watch a horror movie and try to keep himself relaxed in the middle of the movie. And I try to do that a little bit. I was watching this movie called Flowers of War.
I never heard of it.
Never heard of it. Christian Bale is in it.
Really?
And he's a great actor.
Yeah.
I can't really recommend the movie. It was really well done, but you know what it's about? It's about the rape of Nanking.
Yeah.
When Japanese soldiers came in to Nanking and just went berserk and killed everybody and raped all the women, and there's a story about it. So it was a pretty intense movie. So keeping the old HRV down watching that was quite a chore. Yeah. But I guess the idea is if you just get used to doing it, then when you feel your stress level come on, you can automatically start to bring it down. And it's a practice, you know.
Yeah, who wouldn't want to be able to do that?
I think it'd be very helpful, right? So I did a little of that. The other technique I did, at the risk of sounding silly, Dan, is I had this image in my mind of a black jaguar. You know, so Jaguar, you know, they have the spots, but the black ones have the spots, but you can only see them when the light hits them at a certain angle. They only see the spots, so to speak. You know
Is
what I
that
mean?
not what they call a black panther?
I think it's slightly different. I think a black panther is a leopard, a black leopard. And I think the jaguar and the jaguar and the leopard, I think, are closely related, but not necessarily exactly
Let me just
the same
say
animal.
that you never know what you're going to learn listening to this podcast.
Right.
Now you've all learned about panthers.
I think so. But if you see these things slinking around, and the jaguars are just amazing. They can jump in the water. They go down and eat turtles. They can do everything, right? They're lone hunters. So, and
Not to disrespect leopards.
And they're so graceful, right? So, so what I do now, Dan, as part of my warm-up sometimes is I imagine that I'm an actual black jaguar, and I'm like staying nice and relaxed like that.
Are you all slinky?
I get all slinky. So
Do
before
you
my
give
match,
like a like to your opponent?
no, I don't do that. But when I'm pacing before the match, I get a little shoulder movement going. I start pacing in a cat-like manner.
I see what you're saying.
And I think it actually helped me. So, as you know, sometimes when you're doing jiu-jitsu with the gi, your grips just get fried, right? Because you're over-gripping it. I didn't have any of that. Although my first match went very quickly. It was only like 42 seconds, and the guy ended up blowing his knee out, and that was that. My second match went the distance, but I had plenty of energy. I felt great, and that's a big improvement.
You hadn't competed against either of these guys before,
No.
had you?
No. Yeah.
So do you ever learn because you're like, oh, this guy's trying something or doing something I haven't seen? Like even if it's defending the takedown or trying to get it. Like,
so I saw these two guys went against each other first. So the one guy who I met in the finals, he had an effective sort of lapel attack from the closed guard. So I got to see that. I never was in his closed guard, so I didn't have to deal with it. But yeah, I got to scout him a little bit. Yeah. So.
But again, just as part of learning while you're there, are you ever like, oh, I had,
Definitely,
they're trying something that I hadn't quite thought
definitely.
through the defense of it or whatever it is.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So yeah, I felt good. I felt like, and then I read a book when I was down there. Pardon me. There's a guy who wrote a book. I think it's called Mental Management System. This guy's name is Lanny Basham, and he was a world champion and Olympic champion at shooting. And he came up with a system to sort of get your mind right for competition, and it was pretty good. And he's not a psychologist, but he wrote the book decades ago, and I guess he consults and he does all sorts of coaching and seminars. But his book was pretty good. And
is his step one like, well, I'm just shooting, so it's not really that tense a thing? Like to me, compared to like a jiu-jitsu tournament where you're going head to head against someone else, though, that's like so much more tense.
That's one way to put it. But the other thing, Dan, is I think any type of nervousness or anxiety in shooting can have a more
Oh,
profound
I see what you're
effect on
saying.
your
Because
score.
if you have the slightest
Yeah.
twitch,
Yeah.
right. So you
Like-
really need to be calm.
They
Yeah,
actually
that's a
have
good
to
point.
squeeze the trigger before heartbeats. So if
Yeah.
your heartbeat goes up, you have less time to squeeze the trigger. And if you squeeze when your heart beats, it gives it like a little hiccup. Apparently, that's what he said in the book. So it's pretty interesting. Yeah,
Mm.
it's more like putting, I think. Like golfing. So I got some good things out of it. He wasn't. He's not a trained psychologist, and what he's doing isn't based on traditional psychology, which half of that's garbage, anyways. But he had some good stuff there, so I'm going to build on it and maybe communicate.
Maybe do
with our
certain
team.
moves between heartbeats. Like maybe
Certain moves
that's
between-
maybe one of the issues I had. I tried to pass the guard, but on the upbeat.
Well,
from my heart.
So if I can remember his whole book, he breaks things down into 3 portions: the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and self-image. So if your self-image isn't intact, in other words, if you don't believe you can win, it's going to be really hard to win. So you got to find methods to build up your self-image appropriately. And the subconscious is just your training. So when you train properly, you take the deliberate and make it subconscious, make it unconscious.
I would guess that would be huge in jiu-jitsu. I guess
Yeah,
anything.
everything,
But if you
yeah.
go into a tournament like these guys are killers,
Yeah.
you're in trouble. Like that's a really bad
Yeah.
starting place.
It creates hesitation. And once you're hesitating, your timing's all off. Your performance degrades completely. Yeah. So yeah, you got to have complete confidence. The other thing he suggested is never ever think of anything negative. So if you're like, oh, what'll happen if this guy passes? Nope, don't want to think about that. And I think it's pretty good. So when I was getting ready for competition, I used those methods. If any negative thoughts came in, I just banished them from my head, just pushed them out and thought of all the positive things I was going to do. I was going to take the guy down. I was going to pass his guard. I was going to sweep him. I was going to do this, that, and the other thing. I think it's effective. Get my mind in a good place, for sure. I think confidence, once you get there. So I was having this sort of discussion with the great Mark Vignali, my rabbi, Rabbi Mark, and I was thinking that there's only one place overconfidence hurts you. And he was suggesting, oh, you don't want to be overconfident, right? Dan, what is your opinion about overconfidence before I lay out my thoughts on it? Do you have any thoughts about it?
I think we're taught our whole lives to not be overconfident, way more so than is helpful to you.
I
was
agree.
like,
Yeah.
or like not have an ego. There's this idea of like, don't be egotistical. It's all of a piece. I know overconfidence is different than egotistical,
Right.
but I think you're taught to like put yourself down a lot.
Yeah.
Like, and this is not a great example, but it's what pops in my mind because, it just came up. I can't off the top of my head think of the best example, but I remember when my daughter was like this sweet 6-year-old girl, whatever she was, and I put her into martial arts. This is how I ended up in jiu-jitsu. Like I put her in a karate class, and I was like, oh, and she's like this sweet, giggly little girl, and I was like, oh, I put her in karate, and two things came out of that conversation. First, I tell friends, and a common thing was like, oh, are you worried she's gonna aren't you worried she's going to beat people up and bully people? And I was like,
Dan, who's
my
saying
little
that to you?
friends of mine. I was like, little 6-year-old, look at her. I was like, you think that's going to be the issue with her, that she's kicking people in the face? Like,
start her life of street crime.
So it was like putting her down. And then other things she'd like was good at, like she was a really good singer, really good student,
nice.
and these things. And I'd be like, oh, isn't she a good singer and all this? And I'd have friends that would also similarly say like, oh, you don't want to give her like a big ego. Like you don't want to keep telling her like she's a great, like even for a little kid.
So weird.
And so it stuck in my head that like people are doing that starting when people are little kids, like even for their own kids, like let's not give them an ego. Let's not like overly compliment them. Let's make sure they don't think they're so great. Like it's always suppressing.
You know what I think that's based on? They're overweighing the downside of getting your comeuppance, of losing esteem to the tribe. They're just overvaluing life. That's the worst thing that could happen is you somehow fail in front of the village. That's the worst
But it's
thing.
almost, so you put your limits on yourself ahead of time, right?
It's
Or even worse,
ridiculous.
on to your kids.
And,
Where you're like, don't brag, don't think you're great.
and in today's
to your own
society,
kids.
there's no downside to it. It's ridiculous. And the whole, somebody's, I was thinking the word arrogant, right? Arrogant to me is like there's some people that are really competent, that are really good, right? Like say Tom Brady as a quarterback. Would anybody go, he's kind of arrogant as a quarterback? No,
He thinks he's great.
Yeah, he is
thinks
great.
he's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, he is great. And it's more like if somebody's overvaluing themselves and they're blind to it, where they're somehow setting themselves up for failure, I guess that's bad, but it's not even terrible because sooner or later the universe is going to tell you where you're at, right?
So I think it can be rude to brag. That's a different thing.
Different
like,
thing.
if you're excellent at something, to
Right.
brag about it. But that's different than
So Dan,
confidence.
so here's my thing. I think the only place where overconfidence hurts you is if it causes a lack of preparation. So you're like,
Right.
oh, I got this tournament coming up. I'm not even going to train because I'm so much better than everybody anyways. That's a disaster. So I think you leave the overconfidence aside and train. If you train as hard as you can, and if you're trying to develop yourself consistently as much as you can, then when you show up at that tournament, you should be as confident as you possibly can be. Like, no level of humility is helping you then. You know what I mean? And if you're overconfident when you go out there and compete, then you'll just find out. You just find out, oh, I guess that guy was better than me. What's the problem with that? And then you just recalibrate. You're like, you know what? And you shouldn't be measuring yourself anyway. It's just like, I'm better than this guy. I'm going to win. And then you don't win. Go, you know what? It turns out I got to work on my takedowns because this guy took me down and I couldn't stop him.
Like you've said a lot about jiu-jitsu progress. It's just sort of like, what did you learn? Like, well,
Yeah.
what did he do? How
Right.
did you lose?
Right. And I want to win and have our team win because they're better than the opponents. And the reason why they're better is they applied themselves so much in training to develop themselves that they've gotten to be better. And then they just go out there and they just do their thing. They don't have to have any Herculean performance. They don't have to be Rocky Balboa and dig deep. I don't want them to have to dig deep. I just want them to be developing themselves consistently and continually, that when they show up, they win their fair share of medals. If the other guy's better, then he deserves to win. What's the problem,
Yep.
I find that outlook much more psychologically healthy, and then you're there to discover what's going on, right? When you go to compete, it's more of discovery. You don't have really anything to lose. I think it's a much healthier and a much more productive way to look at things. So that's my take on overconfidence,
Right. Anyway, congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much, buddy. Yeah, thank you. We got a team going to compete. At least a dozen people are going to compete up at Grappling Industries, Tingsboro. So I'm really excited
Yeah,
about
so
seeing
that looked like a
everybody do
huge
that.
group of people coming
Yeah.
up.
It's going to be cool.
Do you think does that help, or does that stress
Help what?
people? Like help the team to be like, there's 12 of us, or is it stressful
I
because
think it
there's
helps.
people you know?
No, I think it helps because your shared experience and it brings people closer. I think it helps.
And you're all going through it. You're not like the spotlight's on
There you
me.
go.
I'm
Yeah.
the only one
Yeah.
here. Like, like I have a match, but everyone around you is like, I also have a match.
I think so. And then we think about teamwork. You're not thinking about yourself as much. It's probably better for your psychological perspective. And we always want to keep thinking, development has been my watchword for the last couple of months, Dan. As you probably know, I keep talking about, when I show up, I'm here to develop myself, help my students and teammates develop themselves. And I was thinking that I used to talk a lot about mastery. And I think I like the word develop and development better than the word mastery, Dan. Because I started to think, mastery implies perfection, right?
There's
It's
no such thing, really, right? I mean,
there is no such thing. And it's also kind of a static state, right? Like you've become the master, and now you're done. And that's not realistic either, right? And mastery and being a master, it's kind of intimidating. Like a lot of people would think, I don't think I could ever master that. Where if you just think about, I want to develop. I just want to develop and get a little bit better on a consistent basis. That's so much more approachable, right? So much more doable and realistic, right?
as you said before, so also maybe a little off base is like, I want to get my black belt. is at odds with that too. Like you're
I
like,
think so.
just try to develop and you'll get it. Like,
Right.
just
then
don't
the-
think
you know-
about I want this end
Yeah.
goal. Like just
And there's too many people get to some level. Maybe it's black belt, maybe it's something else, and they're like, okay, I'm done developing. I've got here, which is really a shame, you know. I think I've improved in the last 2 years since I started competing again. I feel like I've really developed a lot, and I'm really happy about that. And I want to keep pushing that, pushing myself to develop. I just feel great about that, you know. I think it makes me a better coach, and it makes me a better training partner. And it's just the way to go, you know. If you hang your sense of self-esteem on how you're attempting to develop yourself, it's like a win-win. Like you can't lose, you know. I see sometimes when people, you know, they put their esteem on their status and how high their status can climb. You know, when you start doing that, I think it's very dangerous and very unhealthy. You know what I mean? You're like, I just want to get to be the black. Now I'm a black belt, and these guys are brown, purple, blue, and white. I'm here. I got my status now. That's not good, you know?
yeah, that's when all those dangers. Like then you get tapped by a purple belt, and you're like you feel devastated.
Well,
or
then you stop
yeah.
training with the brown belts and the purple belts and the good blue belts, and you just shrink yourself down, protect yourself, and it's a disaster. And then you're gonna feel, and then you feel bad about doing that. You know what I mean? It becomes a lose-lose. It's just a complete disaster. So I think that's an important distinction. Am I gonna, you know, hang my self-esteem on my status or my developing? You know what I mean? My commitment to development, say, because that's entirely within your control, right? Status is like there's a lot going on there. It's hard to manage, and it's just potentially really a disaster. So, like in our gym now, I see sometimes we have white belts and black belts, Dan, going like pretty good against each other. And the white belt sometimes are giving the black belt a hard time, and the black belt, he's not like crying about it, or he's not embarrassed or ashamed about it. He's just doing his jiu-jitsu. I think right now, our academy, although we're under some restrictions, it seems like we have such a healthy environment where people, you know, because I keep pounding that mantra about develop yourself, you know, help each other develop. And I'm not lining up by any ranks anymore, any of that nonsense. We're not emphasizing belts or ranks at all. We're just emphasizing development. It just feels so good. I think everyone's development is accelerating because of it. And it just feels healthy. It's just a win-win situation, you know? And I think competition, I mean, the reason why jiu-jitsu is so cool is because you train live so much, right? You spar live. And, you know, and I refer often to Matt Thornton of Straight Blast Gym that, you know, he's always pounding that mantra too about aliveness and live training, how important it is. And it doesn't, you know, you don't have to compete and go to a tournament, but students who do compete and go to tournaments, they get better. It's like a forcing function. It just makes you better. You know what I mean? And training live also with the right attitude in the gym, you get better as well. And I was trying to explain this to somebody, and I thought of like, this is a true story, Dan. I don't want to mention anybody's names because I don't want to be obnoxious or offensive, but I think the ideas behind it are very important, right? So there was this guy who had a school, he's a martial artist, and I read his book. So this is my take on it, my memory of it. I could be completely wrong. I could be a complete jackass here, but that's why I'm not going to say anyone's name. And so the guy took his students to a local judo contest, and they didn't do that well. And he was like, you know what? That's not right. Let's get better at judo. So they started focusing and competing in judo, and before you know it, they were winning the tournaments, and they were like the state judo champion team, which is pretty awesome, you know. And then my understanding is they kind of got away from that, and they kind of just got into self-defense. Like self-defense is great, but the beauty of sport competition is it's objective, it's measurable. You know what I mean? You're getting a real result. It's hard to do real self-defense training, right? Because somebody isn't really attacking you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so anyways, they got away from competing. And then before you know it, you know, this guy, it's a long story. He passed away. His son sort of took over, picked up the mantle of it. And then I saw this guy years ago, the son, and he's doing one of these no-touch things where he's got like a clothesline up with a sheet, and one of his students standing on one side of the sheet, he's on the other side, and he's stomping his foot, and he's knocking the guy over somehow. And I'm like, wow. In one generation, they went from excellent martial artists to weird cult-like nonsense in one single generation, Dan. And I think it's because they got away from the sport training. I'm like, that's not the only way to do it, but it protects you from self-delusion when you're in there competing live.
You can't do a no-touch live competition.
You can't.
You're competing.
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, I can't go to the tournament and go, can you hold this sheet up and like stomp my foot behind the sheet?
Yeah, or just like when the match starts, try your no-touch techniques on your opponent. See where that gets you.
Yeah. But we almost, as humans, we have this blind spot where we can delude ourselves, right? If we're left to, without objective outside input, we can completely delude ourselves, right?
Right. First of all, I think I know exactly who you're talking about, right? Is this
I don't want to go into that, Dan.
Okay.
Let's not talk about that.
I won't.
But
I won't. But it's sort of, yeah.
But that is I think the general concept of what I just conveyed, where you can go, in one generation, you can go from being a real respectable, awesome martial artist group of them to doing some nonsensical stuff if you're not careful.
And what I guess live competition will stop that completely.
I think
right?
so.
Like
I don't think you could do it.
Yeah.
I don't think you could do it if you're doing live competition. You know, that feedback stops you. It protects you from slipping into nonsense.
So it's that simple. Like in a way, like that is one way to just stop it cold.
Yeah.
Like live competition will stop that cold from going in that too far.
Which is, it's kind of a big thing, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of a big deal, right?
Yeah.
So that occurred to me. If you think about it, the story in that way, it's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
In one generation, there was this total sea change, a total tide change, man.
And again, so we're keeping names up, but I believe from the generation before also, the gym started with like a real philosophy of, part of the philosophical school they came from was like, let's do what works, like the opposite of like no touch. It came from what techniques are effective and what things work. And
here's the whole thing about let's do what works. You know, the JKD is let's take what's effective, discard the rest. How do you know what's effective?
Right.
How do you know? Live training.
Yeah, live.
That's the only way you know. So once you leave out that's the essential part of the formula that you need, that live training and or competition. So, I just thought that was really profound, that idea. And it's simple, but it's so important, man.
I remember this one story from way back when where someone came in that was not from a school of live training. And I literally don't remember what school he was or even what art it was. But it was I guess I can say because they're not, but it was at the Florian gym.
Okay.
And someone came in, and it was me and one of the instructors there. And the person was saying, it was sort of rude because he came into the gym and was sort of like, well, if I was fighting you, I wouldn't want to go to the ground because I know you're good at jiu-jitsu, but I would stick to stand up and he was talking about how he would go about beating him in a fight. And so the instructor who was there was like, just waited and was like, well, there's a mat right here.
Let's test out your theory.
Let's go right now.
Yeah.
It was just like, whatever rules you want. Like, we can go. And the guy was like, what? He was just shy. He was like, what do you mean?
Huh?
And he was like, well, if you're saying, why don't we try it? He was like, he's like, he wasn't saying I'm going to hurt you or, he was just like, well, why don't we try it? You're saying you would do these things. And, it was 15 minutes of saying how you would go about beating me. Here's the mat. Let's go. Let's see. And the guy was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like he was completely like.
What do they call that? Cognitive dissonance, right?
Yeah, I think it was like, essentially the guy was like, I don't think you realize this is all kind of a fantasy for me. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm talking theoretically.
You're ruining it.
Yeah, it was just like, and I was sitting there laughing. I was like, it's Dungeons and Dragons for this kid. Like, he thinks he's like, well, since my dexterity is higher than your,
you know, remember how it was resolved?
It was, I feel a little like, well, so when the guy was like all taken aback, I was like shaking my head and kind of laughing. And then I felt like bad that I was like, I'm not laughing at you, but like if the whole
he noticed you snickering.
Yeah, he noticed me. Well, I was trying to laugh off to the side because it was so funny.
That's a snicker, Dan.
Yeah,
you were snickering.
Yeah, and then I was like, I'm not laughing at you. I said one of those things that made no, like I was like, I'm not laughing at you. It's just it's a situation, and
I'm thinking about something funny comic strip I read this morning.
I was thinking about something else from class, like, but then I felt bad. Like I don't want to be the
you don't want
I don't be Cobra Kai, right? It's not like I'm like I don't want to be part of the picking on some kid or, but so I was like, not that he was a kid. I mean, but, but I felt like I didn't want to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
But so then it became awkward and I was like, hey, I was like, I don't mean to be laughing. And then it was like, it became sort of awkward and he was like, he just kind of left. You know what I mean? Like it just resolved in this sort of awkward thing, which I felt kind of bad about. But I always remembered it because of the guy like talking about like, and again, if someone walks into your academy and you're very level-headed, you could get annoyed, right? If he's like, how I would beat you in a fight would be, I wouldn't do jiu-jitsu because you're good at jiu-jitsu, but I would probably, wouldn't you be like,
probably, I don't know. Maybe now I wouldn't even talk to them. I'm becoming a hermit and a curmudgeon now. It's like, I'd probably just walk away from the guy as soon as he started talking.
Right.
Yeah.
I just feel like that's great. Or hand them off to someone or maybe just say, so are you here? What are you here for?
Yeah, I would
That'd
say
be another thing. Like what
cardio kickboxing is across the street. Yeah, just go over there. Yeah. Yeah. I'm finding it a little bit hard. I appreciate the great students we have. I really appreciate serious students. It's so fulfilling working with them. But if somebody's a numbskull, I don't have the time for them anymore. I really don't.
And the idea, again, just back to the like, if you've live training, you can't, do you know what I mean? Like you can't do that. You can't be like, I would beat you in this way. It's like, well, let's see.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Is that true? Let's see. Like you can't have these fantasies in your head.
I agree. I don't have any fantasies. I mean, if somebody attacked me on the street, I don't have any fantasies, Dan. And I might not even use jiu-jitsu. I think the proper way, I've talked about this before, to deal with the self-defense situation, once somebody has decided the rules of society are off, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to bring violence to you, they're no longer a human being to me. They're basically like a rabid raccoon. And I'm just going to get in my car, lock the doors, and drive away. Or I'm going to do whatever I can. Whatever I would do to avoid a raccoon is what I'm going to do. I wouldn't double leg the raccoon, work the back control, and rear naked choke him. I wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? So that's what I would do. And if they put me in a situation where I had to defend myself, then I would do whatever's appropriate.
I always like that example. Like, what would you do for raccoons? Like, you might jump up on a car. You might pick up a garbage can and smash it on, and it's all
run around your car. Just stay away from the person. Yeah. I mean, I think
treat
that's
like
the
an
best.
Animal,
yeah, that's the best advice. Just avoid it at all costs. And if they happen to corner you and you can't get away, then you do what you got to do. Yeah. But I don't have any fantasies. I don't know what would happen. And
but I always said the proper answer to the question. People like this, like, who would win in a fight? There's only one answer, which is I don't know.
Yeah, you got to find out.
I don't know. Like you might suspect that the odds are in one direction, but you're like, who knows? Who knows?
Yeah, definitely. There's one more thing I want to bring up, Dan. We're talking about this sort of relaxation. So this is sort of a tip maybe for somebody who wants to compete and they feel a little anxiety, or just anybody in general is, Dan, I have this.
Sorry, isn't it anxiety? It doesn't even have to be to compete, right?
Right.
Like anxiety before a presentation or
just in life.
Anything. Yeah.
So I've been doing this Wim Hof practice for many, many years now. I think it's amazing. And I don't bury myself in ice. I just basically do the daily breathing practice. And I would recommend that to anybody. And it's going to make your autonomic nervous system function better. Your general anxiety level will come down. I just feel better and healthier than ever by doing that practice. And I know I need a practice. You might not because you're so level-headed, but it's made my life so much better. And like I said, you don't have to do anything extreme. Sometimes I talk about it, and people are like, well, I did a 1 hour ice cold bath. I'm like, I didn't tell you to do that. What are you, crazy? Just do 15 or 20 minutes of breathing. I do 20 minutes of breathing almost every day. And to me, it doesn't sound like an inconvenience. I don't know, because I feel better doing it. I feel healthier, stronger. But what do you think? 20 minutes too much to ask?
No, I saw something. It's going around Facebook. I've seen it for years, but I forgot. Some celebrity said it, but it was like no one questions you have to spend 15 minutes showering every day.
Oh, right. Yeah,
right. And
true.
then it's like, so can you
Yeah.
just spend 15 minutes doing this? Like, no one like rails against it. Like,
Right.
I don't have 15 minutes to shower. I don't have another 10 minutes to shave. Like, but you just do it.
I
And,
keep
like,
a little
if
log
you value
book.
it, you
Yeah.
can do it.
I keep a little logbook, Dan, so I write the date and the time and whatever the times of my breath holds, but that's really not even important. And the reason why I do it is because some days I just miss because life comes up. And then I go back, I go, oh, shoot, I haven't done this in 4 days. And what I find is if a significant amount of time, like 5 days goes by, I start to feel it. I have that creeping sense of a little bit of extra anxiety. So that I just feel so much better for doing it.
And so do people have to, like, I don't do Wim Hof. Would I
Right.
have to, like, Google search video?
You could. I'm
of,
sure he
like,
has
how
a
do
free
you-
course out there that you could do, and then they sell some course probably for like $99. I don't think you need to do it necessarily.
I
but
thought it's kind of easier, right, to just learn how to, like, do the breathing, right? It's-
yeah, in any of my students, you could come in the academy anytime you want, and I'll do it with you for 20 minutes. Be my pleasure for sure. So, I think we should wrap this up.
All right.
We
yeah,
got about
getting there.
50 minutes in, I think. That sounds
Yeah.
perfect, right?
Sounds good.
So good to be back, Dan. Seems like everything's moving in the right direction. Today is, what's today? October what? 16th?
Something like that.
It's the 16th.
Yes, 16. Yeah.
October 16th. Well, thank you for everybody for listening. Please subscribe. Click the notifications bell on YouTube for us. Tell your friends about it. Repost it if you can.
How does it work for all the old timers? There's like a little bell,
There's a little bell, and
and
you just
click on it.
click on it, and it's supposed to notify you.
That's
when
right. I
anyone
clicked
comes
on
out.
it. I don't know that I'm being notified at all.
I don't
but-
think it does all the time. I think YouTube is a little finicky. And I think they're, oddly enough, they're more interested in their own revenue generation than notifying you about my videos.
But it
yeah.
can't hurt to click the bell.
Can't hurt. Can only help. And that's about it. All right. See you all next week.